Are you familiar with the Marshmallow Project? This was a study done at Stanford University using marshmallows that showed that children who were able to delay gratification had greater future success. You probably have heard of it because it's been featured in many TED Talks, podcasts, articles. If you're a parent, this study was especially terrifying because you just know if your 4 year old had a marshmallow in front of them, they're going to grab it. So, does that mean they're doomed for future success? Well, guess what? The results of that study could not be replicated. So today I'm going to dive into the replication crisis and talk about what it means for us as marketers and for those of us trying to drive growth. So let's get started. So I'm going to share a few articles that talk about what the replication crisis is and then move on to what it means for us as marketers and those trying to drive growth. So to get started, let's look at the marshmallow study. In the late 1980s and early 90s, researchers showed that a simple delay of gratification, eating a marshmallow at ages 4 through 6, could predict future achievement in school and life. The idea behind the new paper was to see if the results of that work could be replicated. So this is the new study. What the researchers found when they did the new study, delaying gratification at age 5 doesn't say much about your future. Rather, there are more important and frustratingly stubborn forces at work that push us or pull us from our greatest potential. So, that initial Stanford study, the results, they could not be replicated. Perhaps you're familiar with the term decision fatigue. Now, this is the idea that we have a limited amount of willpower. So, as we make decisions throughout the day, our decisions get worse as our willpower diminishes. So there was a study done around decision fatigue in ego depletion. And so here's a follow-up. Previous evidence on decision fatigue has been re-examined and is challenged. Indeed, a rigorous meta-analysis of 116 experiments using various different decision tasks found no evidence of depletion of self-control. Or perhaps you're familiar with the idea of power posing. And this was the idea that if we took certain stances, we would be bolder in our actions. So this is from a UK website. As the decade progressed, power posing became an idea whose time had come. A hugely successful TED Talk, widespread organizational acceptance, and a number of eye-catching interpretations by leading politicians. Despite this widening embrace, deeper academic questions emerged. Replication attempts did not reproduce the complete breadth of the original results, and by 2016, power posing was firmly embroiled in the replication crisis affecting social psychology. Unless you think it's just these studies, it's not. This is very widespread. In fact, some academic research has shown up to 60% of these studies cannot be replicated. This is another article from Vox. The crisis intensified in 2015 when a group of psychologists, which included Nosek, published a report in Science with evidence of an overarching problem. When 270 psychologists tried to replicate 100 experiments published in top journals, only around 40% of the studies held up. The remainder either failed or yielded inconclusive data. And again, the replications that did work showed weaker effects than the original papers. And like I said, this is called the replication crisis. And it's not just in psychology. This is from ScienceDirect.com. The replication crisis is a term used to refer to the widespread concern about the accumulation of erroneous studies in scientific literature. Psychology researchers arguably have played a central role in the replication crisis, but other fields including medicine, economics, political science, and education also appear to be affected. Unless you think marketing is, since it wasn't mentioned, is not included in this, it absolutely is as well. Marketing has its own issues. Here's from openmkt.org. Myth: many marketing findings have successfully replicated. No, they have not. As of this writing, only 3 out of 34 of all high-powered, pre-registered direct replications have been unambiguously successful. What's even a little more surprising than the fact that these studies can't be replicated is the fact that studies that cannot be replicated are more popular, are referenced more often than those who can. This is from The Big Think. A new study published in Science Advances suggests the problem may be even worse than we thought, finding that non-replicable papers receive 16 more citations per year than replicable ones on average. Over time, that translates to 153 more citations. So it's challenging to replicate these studies, and those that cannot be replicated for a variety of reasons are referenced more often than those that can. And the reason why this is so critical is because just one factor of this is that people are using this with regard to their marketing content. If you just look up decision fatigue in marketing, there's over 23 million results in Google related to decision fatigue in marketing. There's just article after article, all based on data that can't be replicated. And here's a quote from LinkedIn. Marketers actively seem to be most attracted to ideas that do not replicate. Marketing's fascination with new ideas, with disposable ideas, with non-replicating ideas leads us to believe and to assert that there's an even bigger replication crisis in marketing today. So why am I talking about the replication crisis anyway? Well, if in academia, where they have controlled studies, experts in their field, some sort of peer review, is producing studies that can't be replicated at a clip up to 60%, how likely do you think the tip or growth hack you are reading on LinkedIn or other channels is likely to replicate? And isn't that the goal of us reading on LinkedIn and these other channels, is to learn, to find ways to be able to improve our business, to grow our business? So what do we do about this? If in academia they can't replicate results, and it makes it very unlikely that that those tips that we're reading on LinkedIn will lead us to replicate results, well, science is taking a number of steps to try to improve the ability to replicate these studies. And some of these tips will help us improve our understanding of what's going to be effective on LinkedIn. The first thing is there data? When you're reading on one of these channels about marketing tips and growth hacks, do they provide actual real data, meaningful data, data that you can understand and understand where it came from? So that's step one. Step two is to understand, do they publish their methodology? Can you see the steps they took to create these results? So you would be able to replicate those results. You would be able to do the same experiment, or someone else would be able to do the same experiment. And that leads to the third point is, has it been replicated? One case study of data is not that meaningful, especially when you're talking about things that have strategic importance. If you're just talking about an email subject line test, there's not very high risk associated with that. But if you're talking about changing your marketing strategy, you want more than just one case study. You want to have data, you want to have the methodology, and you want to see those results have been replicated over and over again, so you understand if you would be able to replicate that. Anyway, the goal here is to learn. And I love that there's people are sharing so much on LinkedIn. I think that's how we're going to get better. And so the goal is to learn, but we need to make sure that when we put these practices in place, it's going to have the benefits that the person's talking about. So take a look at the data, take a look at their methodology, and make sure that it can be replicated or that others have replicated it. And so you know the impact it's going to have on your business.